Good afternoon. Welcome to Cool Springs. Today is Wednesday, October the 29th, 2025, and this is our series, Life Lessons. And our scripture passage today comes from Genesis chapters 47 through 50, which is the very tail end of Jacob's life. By now, he and his sons and their families are all living down in Egypt. Joseph is in charge of distributing the food throughout the entire nation of Egypt. And Jacob has started to have some health issues. He has had his son Joseph come and visit him. And Joseph has brought his own two sons, who are now middle school to teenage age, to come and present them to his father. And his father adopts them as his own. And by chapter 49, Jacob has called all of his children together because he knows his time on earth is getting short, and he delivers his blessing to each of the children, which includes a prophecy about their future. And he's also telling them, when I die, I want you to promise not to bury me here in Egypt, but to carry me back to the land that God promised my grandfather Abraham, where Abraham and Sarah are buried, where my parents, Isaac and Rebekah, are buried. Make sure you bury me there. I buried Leah there. Make sure that's where you take me back to be buried. And so Jacob and his sons now are looking at the past and the future. And part of the reason I chose that for today's life lesson is this weekend, I made a trip up to Georgia on Saturday to attend my 50th high school class reunion. In fact, I've got the little name tag here because I liked what the class officers did. They used computer technology and they took digital pictures of everybody in the class's senior photograph. And then, of course, they put our names on there. And for the girls, they have to put our maiden names in parentheses because when we were in high school, we were going by our maiden names, and now 50 years later, most of us have different last names. And so they put our full names in there and our CHS class of 1975 reunion on there. So it got me to thinking about what we did at the reunion this weekend, where we were catching up with old friends. And yes, we were remembering some of the things that we did in high school, whether it was remembering fun times with friends or high school ball games or pep rallies or favorite teachers or maybe teachers that weren't so favorite. We did a little bit of remembering, yes. But we spent probably more of our time catching up on where did life take you after high school. Some people went to jobs, some people went into the military, some people went off to college. You know, what happened in the years in between our high school graduation 50 years ago and what's going on in life today. And another part of our reunion site that we were at having dinner, the class officers had put up a photo wall of some of our classmates who have passed away. Some of them died of accidents and diseases before it was even time for a 10-year reunion, let alone a 50-year reunion. And each of us spent some time wandering over to that display and looking at some of the classmates that are gone. I knew some of the people who had passed away from years and years ago, but I saw some new names of people that I knew I went to school with and just didn't know what had happened to them, hadn't seen them on Facebook, haven't kept up. And I was surprised to see their names on the memory wall because they're departed. 50 years ago, when we were getting ready to have our graduation rehearsals and then the graduation ceremony, we had to pick our class motto, and we picked a class song that was from the mid-'70s. A very popular tune then was "We May Never Pass This Way Again." And that was what we chose as our theme song for our class. And sure enough, standing there in the high school gym practicing for the graduation, getting yearbooks signed, and figuring out who's going where next, and thinking about the future. We didn't really have the sense of, sure enough, this graduation ceremony will likely be the last time that all 300 and something of us are in the same place. Because, intellectually you know that, okay, not everybody will be in a position either from distance or from health or family issues to be able to come back for a 10-year or a 25-year or a 50-year class reunion. That it really was going to be the last time we were all in one place. But it was nice to catch up with those who did make it to the 50-year reunion and to check up on where life took us. And so we were swapping more stories about what's happened in between high school and today's reunion than we did even about who we had for English or American history or foreign language or whatever school memory we were doing. When Jacob and his sons at the end of Genesis are now down in Egypt, they're doing some of that looking back at what they were like and what was going on in their family back when, and they're also looking at what's going on right now. When the brothers grew up being jealous of Jacob because, frankly, their father was playing favorites, not necessarily realizing the damage he was doing to his children by playing favorites with one child, making the other so jealous that they were willing. At first they thought they were going to kill him. Then they repented from that and decided, no, we'll just sell him off into slavery and we'll be rid of him. But you see, in the act of doing that, years before, they not only mistreated their brother, but they had to tell Daddy a plausible lie. Otherwise, he might spend the rest of his days hunting for the missing Joseph. They had to make it seem like he's really gone for good, because in their minds, we're rid of Joseph, but we don't want Dad to go look for him. So they did something cruel. They faked Joseph's death. They took that beautiful coat of many colors that Jacob had specially done for him, and they tore it up, and they dipped it in animal's blood from an animal that they had prepared for dinner that night. And they carried it back to their father, knowing he'll conclude that Joseph's been torn to pieces by some wild animal on the road. And Daddy grieved over Joseph for decades. And they knew their father was grieving, and they thought he'd kind of get over it, he'd move on, so to speak. But Jacob wasn't moving on from his grief. And they had choices to make every single day. They either had to keep the lie to protect themselves and their siblings, or they had to tell Daddy the truth, in which case he'd start hunting for Joseph, and he might take it out on them. How could you deceive me like this? So they kept up with the lie until situation of life. There's a famine in the land. They've got to get food. The only place that seems to be free from the famine is down in Egypt, and they have no clue when they show up in Egypt that the Egyptian-looking official who's in charge of deciding who gets to buy grain and who doesn't is their long-lost brother that they sold into slavery. They've long since reunited with Joseph. He's forgiven them. He's let them know, you meant this for evil, but God meant it for good. And now they've been in Egypt for at least 17 years, along with their father and all their families, and Joseph is continually taking care of them. And so when it's time for Jacob to call all the kids together to let them know, my time on earth I know is getting short, my body's just wearing out. Here's what I want from a funeral, and here's God's message for what's going to happen to my children and grandchildren and all the descendants of our family in the future. They're looking back at the way they used to be and how God has worked in their lives through the good times and the bad times. And then they're in the here and now moment. They're standing around Jacob's bedside, and he's revealing to them God's got a future for you, Reuben, for you, Simeon, for you, Levi, for you, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Dan, Naphtali, Joseph, Benjamin, all my children, Gad, Asher, all my children. God has a future for you. Sometimes it's good for us to go to reunions, whether it's a class reunion or a family reunion or a church homecoming. That's the word that most churches use to describe a reunion at the church, a homecoming, to see how people are doing, to share with them how you're doing, to see how God is continuously at work in our lives. By the time Genesis wraps up, not only has Jacob died and his family has honored his request, and they've gone back and they've buried their father in the family tomb, and they've come back to Egypt. But most of the brothers are now concerned that even though they've been in Egypt now for at least 17 years, and Joseph's been good to them all this time, maybe, just maybe, there's still some unfinished business. Maybe there's some hidden resentment that Joseph didn't take it out on us while Daddy was alive. But now that Daddy is gone, maybe now he'll turn on us, remembering the way we used to be back in the day when we did him wrong. And so they made something up that they claimed to Joseph that their father had said. And of course, Joseph just was emotionally overwhelmed and wept when he heard his brother's words, because he'd been kind to them for real. His forgiveness had been for real. And he realizes when his brothers come and say, before our father died, he wanted us to come and ask you to be sure that you really do forgive us for the way we mistreated you decades ago. It broke Joseph's heart to realize that after all this time, you still don't really understand that forgiveness is for real, and that forgiveness can be forever, that relationships can be healed. And so he and his brothers continued to live in Egypt. He continued to be good to them. He kept reassuring them, all is well. You meant it for evil, God meant it for good. And then Joseph asked his brothers to make a promise to him. Hey, when my time comes and God fulfills those promises that Daddy said God was going to fulfill, when our children or our grandchildren or our great-grandchildren, or however long it takes for God to take us back out of Egypt and send us back to claim that inheritance that God promised our grandfather Abraham, make sure that you take me out of Egypt, out of whatever coffin that I'm in Egypt, and move me back to the promised land and bury me in the field of land that Dad promised to me years ago. And his brothers promised that. And so Genesis opens up with God creating a perfect world. And it ends up 50 chapters later with Jacob having been buried. And now Joseph is placed in a coffin. He's died, and he's placed in a coffin in Egypt. And he and his family are just waiting for God to fulfill God's word to them. And 400 years, several generations later, they keep passing down the story from parent to child that the day is going to come when God's going to do everything he promised to do for our ancestors. And when God allows us to go back, we need to make sure that we take the coffin bearing the body of Joseph and bury him back in his own land. So looking backwards, whether you're doing it at a high school reunion or some other type of family church gathering, group of retirees from wherever it is you work getting together, is a good thing, especially when you focus on the relationship bonds. But you live in the present, and you also have to look forward to the future. There's a reason why when you're in an automobile, you have a big windshield, because you need to focus forward to see where you're going and to look at the traffic. But you've also got two mirrors on the side and one inside the car that help you look back to see who may be beside you in another lane and to look backward. And the rear view mirror is a whole lot smaller than the windshield looking forward. But we do need both. So our life lesson for today is, look back, remember honestly, remember fondly, forgive where forgiveness is needed, accept forgiveness if you're the one in need of being forgiven, but look forward to the future.